the most ruined in endogamy. What remains after a century of family crossing? Hidden in the depths of the Appalachian Mountains between foggy valleys and dense forests, the Caldwell family's history lay buried for decades. This is a clan that since 1850 chose not just geographic but also genetic isolation, creating one of the most devastated lineages from the practice of marriage among close relatives ever documented on American soil. Our journey through time reveals how decisions made more than a century ago irrefutably shaped the fate of entire generations. We investigate how isolation, poverty, and old-fashioned beliefs transformed a prosperous family of pioneers into a case study on the devastating effects of prolonged endogamy. In 1847, our history begins when Thomas Caldwell, a prosperous wood trader from eastern Virginia, decided to seek new opportunities in the unexplored lands of the West. Accompanied by his wife Sarah, his 5 children and 2 daughters, plus 3 brothers and their families, Thomas established a small community in what we know today as McDowell County on the Kentucky and western Virginia border. "The land is fertile and the mountains rich with coal," wrote Thomas in his personal diary, recovered in 1978 by local historians. "Here, far from the corrupting influences of large cities, we can build a community based on true Christian values and moral purity." What began as a legitimate and promising enterprise would soon confront its first major challenge. The American Civil War broke out in 1861, dividing the nation and further isolating the Caldwell community. Historical records show that, fearful of being recruited by either side in the conflict, the Caldwell men took their families deeper into the mountains. They settled in a remote valley locally known as Hollow Creek. This insulation, initially a protective measure, became permanent after the war's end. Instead of reintegrating into a developing society, the Caldwells chose to remain in their mountainous refuge, cultivating a growing contempt for external influences and a powerful sense of self-sufficiency. It was within this context that the first marriage between first-degree cousins in the family occurred. In 1879, Joseph Caldwell, grandson of Thomas, joined his cousin Elizabeth. According to Joseph's diary, preserved by Kentucky's Historical Society, this decision followed a failed attempt to find a wife in the nearest city. "The city girls are frivolous and impure," Joseph wrote. "Elizabeth knows our customs and values. Our blood is strong, and it will remain pure." This marriage, considered acceptable at the time in many American rural communities, established a precedent that would be repeated with increasing frequency in the following generations. As the family grew and remained isolated, marriage options became ever more limited. Historian Dr. Margaret Hollingsworth of the University of West Virginia, who extensively studied the Caldwell family records, explains, "What we observed in the Caldwells was not just a case of occasional endogamy but a systematic practice that intensified over several generations." By around 1920, virtually all family members were multiple descendants of common ancestors. The first visible signs of this continuous interbreeding's effects appeared in the 3rd generation of consanguineous marriages. Medical records from 1915, found in the estate of a local doctor, document the birth of 3 Caldwell children with atypical physical characteristics, including extra digits, underdeveloped jaws, and significant cognitive difficulties. Dr. Elijah Montgomery, a rural physician who occasionally attended to the community, noted his observations with growing concern. Problematic births among the Caldwells became alarmingly frequent. "I tried to warn them about the risks among close relatives, but I was received with hostility and accusations of external interference." The Great Depression of 1929 only intensified the family's isolation. While the rest of the country struggled with economic hardship, the Caldwells, already accustomed to self-sufficiency and isolation, retreated even further from outside contact. It was during this period that the practice of marriages between siblings and half-siblings began to occur. According to documents recovered later, in 1937 a social worker sent as part of New Deal initiatives to assist isolated rural communities managed a brief visit to the Caldwell settlement. His report, filed with the Library of Congress, offers a disturbing glimpse. The Caldwell community, comprising approximately 60 individuals, lives in conditions of extreme poverty and isolation. I observed numerous cases of obvious physical deformities and atypical behaviors. When I questioned the prevalence of these conditions, I was informed they were considered marks of family distinction. I recommend immediate intervention by public health authorities. Despite this recommendation, no significant intervention occurred. With the beginning of World War II, government resources were redirected, and the Caldwell family continued its path of isolation and endogamic marriage practices. Check now if you are already subscribed to this channel so you don't miss the most impactful revelations about hidden consanguinity stories that have shaped entire communities and left devastating genetic legacies persisting to this day. The 1950s marked a critical point in the Caldwell family history. It was during this decade that the near-century-long genetic consequences of consanguineous marriages became impossible to ignore, even for the family members themselves. An unofficial census conducted in 1952 by local health authorities, who finally gained access to the community, documented that of the 82 Caldwell family members living in Hollow Creek, 37 had significant physical anomalies. These included reduced stature, craniofacial malformations, extra fingers, syndactyly, severely compromised vision, and varying degrees of cognitive impairment. Dr. Harold Jenkins, a geneticist at the University of Louisville who studied the Caldwell medical records in the 1970s, offers a scientific explanation. What we observed in the Caldwell family is a classic example of how endogamy intensifies the expression of harmful recessive genes. In a diverse population, these genes rarely find their pair. The likelihood of these recessive genes meeting increases dramatically. The Caldwell family's situation remained largely unknown to the American public until 1956, when a journalist from the Louisville Courier-Journal, Robert Thornton, heard rumors about a mountain family with unusual characteristics. Initially interested in writing a human interest article on rural life in the Appalachians, Thornton instead discovered something far more disturbing. With considerable difficulty, and after gaining the confidence of some younger family members who occasionally visited the nearest town to sell handicrafts, Thornton managed to visit the community. The article he published next, entitled The Forgotten Valley, caused a national sensation. Hidden in the mountains of our own state, Thornton wrote, "Are Americans that time has forgotten?" The Caldwell family exists in near-complete isolation, perpetuating marriage practices that modern science has long recognized as harmful. The result is a community where genetic deformities and cognitive deficiencies have become the norm, not the exception. The article, accompanied by photographs showing precarious living conditions and family members with obvious physical anomalies, prompted immediate reactions. Social assistance organizations, religious groups, and state authorities announced plans to intervene. However, the Caldwell family's response was to withdraw even deeper into isolation, blocking access to Hollow Creek and threatening any outsider who tried to approach. One of the most disturbing aspects revealed by Thornton's investigation was the belief system the family had developed to justify their marriage practices. Interviews with more communicative members revealed a peculiar ideology mixing distorted interpretations of religious texts with a strong sense of genetic exceptionalism. "Caldwell blood is special," said family patriarch Jeremiah Caldwell in a rare interview with Thornton. "The outer world is contaminated. We preserve our purity through generations, and the marks on our bodies are signs of our distinction, not curses as the ignorant believe." This belief in the superiority of family blood was used to justify even the most extreme cases of endogamy, including unions between parents and children and between siblings, as documented in family records recovered later. Dr. Elizabeth Harrington, a cultural anthropologist who has studied isolated communities of the Appalachians, explains this phenomenon. "What we see in the Caldwells is a classic example of how prolonged isolation can lead to the development of belief systems that justify harmful practices. As negative genetic effects became more evident, the family developed a narrative that transformed these consequences into marks of distinction or even blessings. The 1960s brought significant changes to the region with government programs like President Johnson's War on Poverty, which specifically focused on the isolated communities of the Appalachians. Roads were improved, schools were built, and social services were expanded. These initiatives finally began to reach even the most isolated corners of the mountains. In 1967, social workers and health professionals, accompanied by state police, finally gained access to Hollow Creek after receiving anonymous reports of inhumane conditions involving children. What they found shocked even the most experienced professionals. "The situation exceeds adequate description," wrote social worker Clara Roberts in her official report. "Children with severe deformities live without access to basic medical care. We have identified several cases of individuals with urgent medical needs who have never received any form of treatment. The level of cognitive impairment in many cases negates the capacity for informed consent in the marriage relations that continue to occur." This intervention resulted in the removal of 14 Caldwell children, all under 12, who were placed in state custody due to hazardous and inadequate living conditions. The action generated violent resistance from some family members, resulting in the deaths of 2 state police officers and 3 Caldwell men during an armed confrontation that became locally known as the Hollow Creek Siege. The 1970s marked an inflection point in the history of the Caldwell family. After the violent 1967 confrontation, state authorities established a permanent presence in the region, ensuring social and health services could finally reach the isolated community. The 14 children removed from Hollow Creek became the object of intense medical and psychological study. A comprehensive report published in 1972 by the Kentucky State Department of Health detailed the genetic consequences of generations of endogamy. The young Caldwells have a constellation of anomalies consistent with high levels of genetic homozygosity, observed Dr. Richard Stevenson, the study's lead geneticist. "We documented an alarming incidence of rare conditions including polydactyly, cleft palate, congenital heart disease, skeletal dysplasia, and microcephaly. More worrying is that many individuals have multiple conditions simultaneously, something rarely observed even in populations with high rates of consanguineous marriages." Stevenson's study revealed that the inbreeding coefficient, a measure of an individual's probability of inheriting identical genes from both parents, was exceptionally high among the Caldwells. In a general population, this coefficient is near 0. Between first-degree cousins, it is approximately 0.0625. Among the young Caldwells studied, the values ranged from 0.25 to an impressive 0.375, levels usually expected only in relations between full siblings or between parents and children. These discoveries quickly became a case study in American medical schools, dramatically illustrating the risks of prolonged endogamy. The Caldwell case significantly contributed to developing more rigorous laws against consanguineous marriages in various states during the 1970s. For the family members who remained in Hollow Creek, government intervention brought profound and not always welcome changes. Social workers reported continuous resistance to changing marriage practices, even in the face of clear evidence of the resulting genetic damage. Martha Caldwell, then 42 and one of the few family members without obvious physical anomalies, emerged as an influential voice during this period. In a 1975 interview with a documentary filmmaker, she offered a glimpse into the family's thinking. "You come here with your diplomas and laws, saying our way of living is wrong, but who are you to judge?" For generations, Caldwells took care of their own. "We love our children no matter how they are born. In the outside world, they would be ridiculed and rejected. Here, they are family." This perspective, while understandable in human terms, dramatically contrasted with the medical evidence of the damage caused by the family's marriage practices. Dr. James Montgomery, a psychologist who worked extensively with family members during this period, noted, "What we witnessed with the Caldwells is a form of isolation that transcends the geographical. Throughout generations, they developed a belief system that normalizes harmful practices and reinterprets negative consequences as positive. Breaking this cycle requires more than just medical or legal intervention, it requires a complete cultural reorientation." If you are following this story, stop right now and leave the phrase "the blood that unites also condemns" in the comments. Your participation is fundamental for us to continue bringing these stories that reveal the darkest corners of the human experience. In 1977, a tragic event further shook the already fragile Caldwell community. A fire, apparently caused by a knocked-over lamp, quickly consumed several of the precarious wooden houses in Hollow Creek. 5 family members, all with reduced mobility due to genetic conditions, perished in the flames. This incident catalyzed a new wave of government intervention. State authorities, citing dangerously inadequate living conditions, ordered the complete evacuation of Hollow Creek. The 37 remaining family members were relocated to subsidized housing in 2 small towns in the region. This forced dispersion, though traumatic for many, finally broke the cycle of extreme isolation. For the first time in over a century, the Caldwells were forced to interact regularly with wider society. Dr. Catherine Reynolds, a sociologist who accompanied the relocation process, documented the difficulties of adaptation. "We observed extreme levels of social anxiety, institutional distrust, and difficulty adapting to basic social norms." For many of the adult Caldwells, especially those with cognitive limitations, the transition was deeply traumatic. The children, on the other hand, showed remarkable resilience and adaptability. A particularly notable aspect of this period was the medical community's reaction to the Caldwell specific needs. Hazard Regional Hospital in Kentucky established a specialized clinic dedicated to treating the numerous health conditions afflicting the family. This initiative became a pioneering model for treating rare genetic conditions in rural communities. Dr. Harold Jenkins, who supervised the clinic, wrote in 1979, "The medical challenges presented by the Caldwell family are unprecedented in my career. We are essentially treating the consequences of an involuntary genetic experiment that extended for more than a century. Each patient has a unique constellation of conditions, many of which are rarely seen jointly in conventional medical practice." The 1980s brought significant advances in the scientific understanding of the Caldwell case, coinciding with important developments in medical genetics. With the emergence of new chromosomal analysis and genetic mapping techniques, researchers could finally start accurately documenting the exact mechanisms by which prolonged endogamy had affected the family. In 1982, the University of Kentucky began an ambitious genealogical and genetic study of the Caldwells, led by Dr. Richard Stevenson. The 6-year study involved collecting biological samples from 78 living family members and meticulously reconstructing their complete genealogical tree using historical records, family diaries, and interviews. "What we found was truly unprecedented in Western medical literature," Stevenson reported in his preliminary conclusions. The Caldwell family possibly represents the most extensive and documented case of systematic endogamy in the modern United States, comparable to some historical European royal dynasties or extremely isolated communities in other parts of the world. Genetic analysis revealed that after generations of consanguineous crosses, the Caldwell genome had become exceptionally homogeneous. Harmful recessive genes that would usually remain hidden in a diverse population had become prevalent. The study identified 27 specific genetic mutations occurring at alarmingly high frequencies among family members. Among the most significant findings was identifying a specific mutation in the PAH gene responsible for a rare form of phenylketonuria, a metabolic condition that, when untreated, causes progressive neurological impairment. This particular mutation, nicknamed the Caldwell variant in medical literature, had not been previously documented and seemed exclusive to the family. This mutation probably arose in a single ancestor early in the family's history, explained Dr. Stevenson. Under normal circumstances, it would have remained a genetic rarity. However, due to repeated consanguineous marriages, the mutation spread widely within the family lineage, affecting approximately 40% of the living members to some degree. The 1988 publication of these results in the prestigious American Journal of Human Genetics generated intense discussion in the scientific community and renewed public interest in the case. A PBS documentary entitled Blood Legacy: The History of the Caldwells reached a national audience, bringing unprecedented attention to the risks of endogamy and the family's specific situation. For the Caldwells themselves, the 1980s were a period of continuous and difficult adaptation. Younger generations, particularly those born after the family's dispersion in 1977, began integrating into wider society with varying degrees of success. Rebecca Caldwell, born in 1968 and one of the children removed during the initial intervention, became an important family spokesperson. Despite presenting some typical physical characteristics of the family lineage, including extra fingers on both hands, Rebecca showed remarkable intellectual capacity and determination. After completing high school with honors, she earned a scholarship to the University of Kentucky. "I carry the name Caldwell proudly," Rebecca declared in a moving speech during a 1989 conference on rare genetic diseases, "not because of the choices my ancestors made, but despite them. Our history serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of isolation and ignorance, but also the remarkable resilience of the human spirit." For older family members, however, adaptation proved extremely challenging. Many, especially those with significant cognitive impairment, never fully adjusted to life outside Hollow Creek. Social assistance records document high rates of depression, self-destructive behavior, and even suicide among adult Caldwells. Ezekiel Caldwell, born in 1932 and one of the last patriarchs of the original community, remained a vocal critic of government intervention until his death in 1985. In one of his last interviews, he expressed a sentiment shared by many of the oldest Caldwells: "You have taken us from our land, have separated our families, and treat us as specimens in your laboratories. You say it was for our own good. But look at us now. We are scattered, lost without our community. In Hollow Creek, we had purpose and belonging. What do we have now?" This perspective contrasted strongly with objective medical data. A follow-up study conducted in 1986 documented significant improvements in the health and life expectancy of younger Caldwells who received regular medical care. Particularly notable was the fact that since the family's dispersion and the consequent cessation of consanguineous marriages, no new child had been born with the most severe forms of the genetic conditions that characterized previous generations. Dr. Elena Williams, a pediatric geneticist who worked extensively with Caldwell children during this time, noted, "We are witnessing in real time how genetic diversification can reverse the damage caused by generations of endogamy. Caldwell children born to individuals outside the family have dramatically fewer congenital anomalies. It's a validation of the basic principles of population genetics." As the decade ended, it became increasingly clear that the intervention, despite its traumatic aspects, had effectively interrupted a cycle of cumulative genetic damage that could have led to the complete unviability of the family lineage within a few generations. As we approach the present, the history of the Caldwell family evolves from a case study on the dangers of endogamy into a more complex narrative about inheritance, identity, and reconciliation. The 1990s and 2000s witnessed both persistent challenges and remarkable successes among the descendants of this singular family lineage. In 1992, Dr. Richard Stevenson and his team published their definitive study on the Caldwells, a monumental work that meticulously documented 6 generations of family history and its genetic effects. The study, considered a milestone in the literature on isolated population genetics, revealed that the average inbreeding coefficient among Caldwells born before 1977 was approximately 8 times higher than that observed in communities where marriages between first-degree cousins occur occasionally. The Caldwell case represents an almost unparalleled extreme in modern medical literature, concluded Stevenson. The observed genetic consequences offer exceptionally valuable insights into how recessive deleterious genes manifest in highly endogamic populations, with significant implications for our understanding of rare genetic diseases in general. For the Caldwells themselves, the 1990s were marked by a process of gradual social integration and, in some cases, reconciliation with their complex legacy. A significant event occurred in 1994 when Rebecca Caldwell, now a social work graduate working with isolated rural communities, organized the first formal family reunion since the Hollow Creek dispersion. Over 120 Caldwells from various generations attended the event held at a state park near the family's original settlement. For many younger members, it was the first opportunity to fully understand their family history's extent. "We are not here to celebrate the choices that led our family to so many difficulties," said Rebecca in her opening speech. "We are here to recognize our survival and our determination to break the cycle. Knowing our story is the first step in ensuring it does not repeat itself." The reunion became an annual event, gradually evolving from a family gathering into an informal conference on rare genetic conditions. In 1999, the Caldwell Foundation for Genetic Research was officially established to support studies on rare genetic diseases and educational programs on the risks of endogamy. While some family members actively embraced their roles as educators and advocates, others fought the persistent stigma associated with the Caldwell name. Judicial documents show that between 1990 and 2005, at least 28 individuals with Caldwell ancestry legally petitioned to change their surnames, citing discrimination and harassment. James Caldwell, born in 1970 and unaffected by polydactyly and other physical family anomalies, described his experience in a 2002 article. "Growing up as a Caldwell means carrying this genetic history not only in your body but also in your name. Every introduction, every job interview, every first date is preceded by the inevitable question, Caldwell." Despite these challenges, the first decade of the 21st century also witnessed remarkable success stories among Caldwell descendants. Dr. Michael Johnston, a geneticist at Johns Hopkins University who followed the family for decades, observed in 2010, "What we see now, 3 decades after the intervention that dispersed the family, is a remarkable demonstration of human resilience. Many of the younger Caldwells, born after the end of consanguineous marriages, are leading productive and healthy lives, some despite significant genetic conditions. It is a testament to both the potential of medical intervention and the importance of appropriate social support systems." A particularly significant milestone occurred in 2007 when Thomas Caldwell, great-grandson of Hollow Creek's last patriarch, became the first family member to graduate from medical school, specializing in medical genetics. Dr. Thomas Caldwell dedicated his career to studying and treating the same conditions that affected generations of his own family. "My family history is not just a legacy," he declared at his graduation ceremony. "It is a responsibility and an opportunity. Few doctors have such an intimate understanding of the conditions they treat. This personal knowledge informs every aspect of my practice." In 2012, the publication of the book Blood of My Blood, The Caldwell Saga, written by historian and anthropologist Dr. Margaret Hollingsworth, brought renewed public attention to the family's history. The meticulously researched and sensitively approached book became a national bestseller and was later adapted into an acclaimed documentary series. This renewed exposure generated both benefits and challenges. It significantly increased public awareness of the risks of endogamy and the importance of genetic diversity, but it also revived the sensational interest that many Caldwells had fought to leave behind. In response, the Caldwell Foundation intensified its educational efforts, developing curriculum programs for medical schools and creating informative resources for isolated rural communities where endogamic practices still occasionally occur. Today, more than 150 years after Thomas Caldwell led his family into the isolation of the Appalachian Mountains, his descendants remain a powerful reminder of the long-term consequences of genetic isolation. The conditions that afflict many family members will continue to demand specialized medical care throughout their lives, and the name Caldwell still carries a stigma in parts of Kentucky and Western Virginia. However, the family's trajectory also represents a narrative of hope and transformation. The latest generations of Caldwells, born after the end of endogamic marriage practices, have drastically fewer severe genetic conditions than their ancestors. They carry the genetic markers of the family's endogamy but have access to medical care and social support their ancestors could never have imagined. In 2015, a comprehensive study by the University of Kentucky compared genetic data from 5 generations of Caldwells, graphically demonstrating how genetic diversification over the last 4 decades began to reverse the legacy of endogamy. The study revealed that the frequency of deleterious recessive genes, although still high compared to the general population, had significantly diminished among Caldwells born after 1980. What we observe in contemporary Caldwells is a fascinating example of how genetic flow can begin to recover a severely compromised lineage, explained Dr. Jennifer Ramirez, the study's lead author. While the effects of historical endogamy are still evident, each new generation shows measurable signs of greater genetic vigor. For the approximately 250 individuals who can trace their lineage directly to the original Hollow Creek inhabitants, this research has offered a new perspective on their place in American medical and social history. Particularly remarkable was the 2018 development of an experimental gene therapy specifically targeting the Caldwell variant of phenylketonuria, the unique genetic mutation identified decades earlier by Dr. Stevenson. This therapy, developed with the active participation of affected family members, showed promising results in initial clinical trials. Dr. Thomas Caldwell, who participated in the development team, described the significance of this advance. It is deeply moving to see how our family's suffering is being transformed into knowledge that benefits not only Caldwells but potentially anyone affected by similar genetic conditions. In a way, we are redeeming our history. A less visible but equally significant dimension of the Caldwells' contemporary history involves the continuous struggles of the oldest family members, those born during the height of endogamic practices in Hollow Creek. For many of these individuals, now in their 60s and 70s, complete social integration was never fully achieved. Harold Caldwell, born in 1955 and affected by multiple characteristic family conditions including moderate cognitive impairment, reflected on this reality in a 2020 testimonial for the Caldwell Foundation archives. Sometimes I feel we exist between two worlds. We are too Caldwell to be completely accepted in the outside world, but we were also separated from the life we knew. Hollow Creek was not perfect, I know that now. But it was the only place where I never felt different. This feeling of persistent displacement led the Caldwell Foundation to establish the Caldwell Community Center in Caldwell County in 2019, not far from the original Hollow Creek place. The center offers assisted housing to family members with special needs and educational and support programs for all Caldwell descendants. The center is not an attempt to recreate the isolation of Hollow Creek, explains Rebecca Caldwell, now the Foundation's executive director. It's exactly the opposite, a space where Caldwells can connect with their roots while remaining fully engaged with wider society. It's about honoring our history without being limited by it. As we approach the present, it is impossible not to reflect on the profound lessons offered by the Caldwell saga. Their history vividly illustrates the dangers of extreme isolation and prolonged endogamy, but also the remarkable human ability to adapt and renew. The Caldwell's genetic records, now digitally preserved as part of the Human Genome Project, will continue to inform our scientific understanding for generations. Their social journey from extreme isolation to gradual reintegration offers valuable insights into how isolated communities can be effectively supported without completely destroying their cultural identity. Perhaps the deepest lesson comes from the words of Martha Caldwell, who in her last interview before her death in 2008 at age 75, offered a moving reflection. For a long time, we thought we were protecting ourselves from the outside world. Only later did we realize we were also imprisoning ourselves. The blood we shared is important, it connects us through generations. But it is in the mixing of different bloods that we find strength and renewal. That is the truth I wish we had understood a century ago. Today, as new Caldwells are born into circumstances radically different from their ancestors, their history remains a powerful reminder of the dangers of extreme isolation and the vital importance of genetic diversity for human health. It is a story that deserves to be remembered not only by the Caldwells themselves but by all of us. If you have watched this far, it is because you appreciate this story. Leave a comment saying "I watched here" so I can get to know you and see who truly enjoys the stories here on the channel. Be sure to leave your like and share this video with friends and family interested in these fascinating stories about the human condition. And of course, if you are not yet subscribed, take the opportunity to sign up now and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our next investigations into the darkest secrets of human history.